What the fuck is up, you glorious bastards? Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we grab a shitload of info and cram it into your brain holes whether you like it or not. Today, we're wading into the smartphone patent wars, that clusterfuck where every goddamn phone company is suing the ever-loving piss out of each other. It's a goddamn bloodbath, and we're diving in head first.
Let's cut the crap. We're talking about patents. Those legal documents that give companies exclusive rights to their precious inventions. For a limited time, of course, because even the legal system understands that monopolies are a total buzzkill.
So it's like if you figured out a revolutionary way to pick your nose, you could patent that shit and make a fortune off every booger-picking bastard out there.
Not exactly, but I appreciate the visual. The point is, patents protect intellectual property in the smartphone world. We're talking billions of dollars at stake,
Right.
not to mention who gets to control what you're tapping on.
Okay, so these patents are a big fucking deal. But when did this whole legal dick measuring contest actually start?
Well, things really started heating up back in 2009. Remember Nokia, the kings of the brick phone? They were sitting pretty until Apple came along and blew everyone's minds with the iPhone. Nokia, feeling a little pissed, decided to sue Apple over 10 patents.
Classic Nokia. They're probably still butthurt about losing their crown. But what did Apple do? Roll over and play dead?
Hell no. Apple countersued Nokia over 13 patents. It was like a couple of toddlers fighting over a broken toy, except the toy was worth billions.
So the battle lines were drawn. It was Apple, the shiny new kid on the block, versus Nokia, the old guard clinging to its glory days. And shit was about to get real.
From there, the smartphone patent wars exploded with lawsuits flying faster than dicks at a porn convention.
And then Android waltzed onto the scene and things went full-blown nuclear.
Right. Android was like pouring gasoline on an already raging fire. Google's open source system meant tons of manufacturers could use it, which led to a tangled-ass web of patents and potential lawsuits.
It's like everyone suddenly had a loaded gun and they were all aiming at each other just waiting for someone to flinch.
Essentially, yes. Apple, Samsung, Google, Microsoft, HTC, everyone jumped into the legal mosh pit.
So what you're saying is the next time I use my phone to watch some weird-ass porn, I should thank a lawyer.
Maybe not specifically for the porn part, but these lawsuits did impact the features we use every day. Touch screens, app stores, all that shit was fought over in court.
Hold up. You're telling me that every swipe, every tap, every selfie I take is built on a mountain of legal bullshit? That's kind of depressing.
Not necessarily. While the legal battles were messy, they forced companies to innovate and come up with new ideas to avoid getting sued. That competition pushed the industry forward, even if it was fueled by a healthy dose of corporate greed and legal assholery.
Okay, so it wasn't all bad. But let's be real, some of these lawsuits were just plain ridiculous, right? Like that time Samsung got fined $1 billion for stealing Apple's pinch to zoom feature. $1 billion for pinching the screen. What the actual fuck?
That case became a symbol of how insane these patent wars could get. Apple argued Samsung ripped off their design and interface, and the jury agreed. That billion-dollar fine was a message. Don't fuck with Apple's patents.
Damn, Apple wasn't playing around. But was pinch to zoom really that revolutionary? I mean, I've been pinching and zooming on porn sites for years.
The point wasn't just about the specific feature. It was about establishing dominance and setting a precedent. Apple wanted to show the world they were the top dog in the smartphone game, and they were willing to go to court to prove it.
So Apple basically said, we're the kings of the smartphone jungle, and if you even think about copying us, we'll sue your ass back to the Stone Age.
Essentially, yes. And that message resonated throughout the industry.
Speaking of sending messages, remember that time a UK judge said Samsung's tablets weren't as cool as iPads? That's got to be the most savage burn in legal history.
Yeah. It was certainly a memorable quote. The judge essentially ruled that Samsung's tablets weren't infringing on Apple's design because they weren't as aesthetically pleasing. It highlighted the subjectivity of design patents and the challenge of proving infringement.
So basically Samsung won that round by being a bunch of uncool losers. That's hilarious.
It's more nuanced than that. But the judge's comment did underscore the absurdity of some of these legal arguments.
And speaking of absurdity, we can't forget about the time Apple had to apologize to Samsung for accusing them of copying. That's like seeing a unicorn shit a rainbow. It just doesn't happen.
It was a rare moment of humility for Apple. They had to admit they were wrong and issue a public apology to Samsung for claiming the Galaxy Tab copied the iPad. It showed that even the biggest tech giants weren't above the law and could get called out for making bullshit accusations.
Wow, so even Apple has to eat shit sometimes. That's oddly satisfying.
Yeah.
But okay, we've got billion-dollar fines judges talking about coolness and public apologies. This is some juicy shit. But what does it all mean for the rest of us? How did all this legal drama actually impact the phones we use every day?
That's a great question, and we'll dive deeper into that in the next part of our deep dive. For now, just remember that every time you swipe, tap, or take a selfie, you're experiencing the fallout of this epic patent war.
So next time you're scrolling through TikTok on your fancy phone, remember the insane legal battles that made it all possible. And stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive, where we'll uncover even more of the juicy details and explore how these lawsuits shape the smartphone landscape we know and love today. Stay informed, you beautiful bastards.
Welcome back to the deep dive, you magnificent degenerates. We're still knee-deep in the smartphone patent war, sifting through the wreckage of lawsuits and legal bullshit.
That's right, you glorious freaks. Last time we talked about how this shitstorm started. Nokia threw the first punch, but Apple hit back harder. Then Android came along and turned the whole goddamn thing into a royal rumble.
We also dug into some juicy details about those early lawsuits, like Samsung getting slapped with $1 billion fine and Apple having to eat crow and apologize. Good times.
Yeah, it's amazing how much money and ego are wrapped up in these little slabs of glass and metal we call smartphones. But today we're going deeper. We're dissecting some of the biggest and most influential lawsuits in this whole patent war saga. So let's get our hands dirty and see what makes this shit tick. What were some of the most batshit crazy lawsuits in this smartphone patent war clusterfuck?
Oh, where do we even begin? There were so many. But one that stands out is the Apple versus Samsung case from 2012. This one was a real slobber knocker.
Oh yeah, that was a classic. Apple basically accused Samsung of copying their homework right. Like, down to the last fucking semicolon.
Essentially, yes. Apple claimed Samsung ripped off the iPhone's design and user interface. Everything from the rounded corners of the phone to the grid layout of the home screen. They even went after the bounce-back effect when you scroll to the end of a list.
Seriously. They sued over the goddamn bounce-back effect. Talk about nitpicking.
Hey, when you're fighting for billions of dollars, you tend to get a little anal retentive.
Fair enough. But did Apple actually win that shit?
They sure did. The jury sided with Apple and awarded them over $1 billion in damages. It was a massive victory for Apple and sent shockwaves through the industry.
Damn, $1 billion.
Yeah.
That's enough money to buy a small country. But did it actually change anything? Did Samsung stop copying Apple?
It's hard to say for sure, but the case definitely made other phone makers think twice about how closely their designs resembled the iPhone. No one wanted to be on the receiving end of Apple's legal wrath.
So after that, everyone was walking on eggshells, afraid to even look at an iPhone the wrong way. Talk about a power move.
The case established Apple as a dominant force in the smartphone market and set a precedent for future design patent litigation. They basically put everyone on notice. This is our territory and we'll defend it with every lawyer we can afford.
Okay, so Apple was throwing their weight around. But what about the other players? Did anyone else manage to land any knockout punches?
Microsoft had some notable wins as well. They sued Motorola and Barnes & Noble for using Android without licensing their patents.
Wait, Microsoft was suing people over Android? But isn't Android a Google thing? What the hell were they thinking?
Well, Microsoft claimed that Android infringed on several of their patents, even though Google developed the operating system. They argued that anyone using Android, even indirectly, owed them licensing fees.
So Microsoft was basically playing both sides of the field. They were making money off Android while also trying to sue the pants off anyone who used it. Sneaky bastards.
They were definitely playing a strategic game. They wanted a piece of the Android pie, even if they weren't the ones baking it. And let's be honest, who doesn't like pie?
True pie is delicious. But did they actually manage to squeeze any money out of Google?
They never went after Google directly, but they did reach licensing agreements with many Android phone makers. Those deals generated a hefty chunk of change for Microsoft.
So even though they weren't a major player in the smartphone market, they were still raking in the dough. Talk about a sweet deal.
The patent wars showed that you didn't need to sell the most phones to win. Sometimes it was all about owning the right patents and knowing how to leverage them.
Okay, so we've got Apple flexing its design muscles and Microsoft playing patent poker like a pro. But what about the little guys? Did any of them manage to make a splash in this legal Shark Tank?
Well, HTC managed to score a few points against Apple. They successfully challenged the validity of some of Apple's patents in a UK court and even managed to block the import of some iPhone models into the US.
Holy shit, HTC actually stood up to Apple.
Wow.
That's like a chihuahua taking a bite out of a Rottweiler's ass.
It was a significant victory for HTC. It showed that even the biggest tech giants weren't invincible, and that challenging the validity of patents could be an effective defense strategy.
So HTC basically said, hey, Apple, your patents are bullshit. We're going to prove it. That takes balls.
It was a bold move, and it paid off. Their victories proved that smaller companies could still hold their own in the patent arena, even against a behemoth like Apple.
All right, so we've got big companies duking it out over billions of dollars, smaller companies scoring upset victories, and patent trolls lurking in the shadows waiting to pounce. This is starting to sound like a goddamn Quentin Tarantino movie.
It certainly had all the ingredients of a good Hollywood blockbuster. Money, power, betrayal, and even a few underdog heroes.
So what's the moral of the story? What can we learn from this whole chaotic mess, besides the fact that lawyers are expensive as fuck?
Well, for one thing, it shows that patents are a double-edged sword. They're designed to protect intellectual property and encourage innovation, but they can also be weaponized to stifle competition and extract obscene profits.
So it's like a game of chicken where everyone's trying to outmaneuver each other and hoping they don't crash and burn in the process.
That's a pretty apt analogy. The smartphone patent wars showed us that the patent system is a complex and often messy beast. It's a constant balancing act between protecting innovation and fostering competition.
Yeah, it sounds like a real clusterfuck. But let's talk about those patent trolls for a minute. Those bottom-feeding scumbags who buy up patents just to sue people. What's their deal?
Ah, yes, the infamous patent trolls. They're like the vultures of the patent world, circling overhead, waiting to feast on the carcasses of unsuspecting companies.
They don't create anything. They just leech off the hard work of others. They're like the goddamn mosquitoes of the business world.
Their critics argue that they stifle innovation by creating a climate of fear and uncertainty. Companies become afraid to develop new products or services for fear of being sued by a patent troll wielding some obscure patent they bought for pennies on the dollar.
So it's basically extortion with a legal veneer. You got to pay up or risk getting dragged through a costly and time-consuming legal battle.
That's the general idea. But there are also those who defend patent trolls, believe it or not.
Wait, seriously? Who the hell defends those parasites? Are they getting paid off or something?
Their defenders argue that they play a valuable role in the patent system by ensuring that patents are properly valued and enforced. They also claim that they provide a market for patents that might otherwise go unused, allowing smaller inventors to profit from their ideas without having to navigate the complexities of bringing a product to market.
So their argument is basically,
Yeah,
hey, we're just savvy businessmen taking advantage of a broken system.
that's one way to put it. It's a complex issue with valid arguments on both sides. But regardless of where you stand on the issue, there's no denying that patent trolls have had a significant impact on the smartphone landscape.
Okay, so patent trolls are a necessary evil. Or maybe just plain evil. Either way, they're here to stay. But what about the overall impact of the smartphone patent wars? Did all this legal wrangling ultimately help or hurt the industry? Or did it just line the pockets of a bunch of lawyers?
That's a tough question to answer definitively. The impact has been multifaceted.
Meaning?
On one hand, the patent wars forced companies to innovate. They were constantly trying to one-up each other to come up with new features and designs that wouldn't get them sued. This led to a rapid evolution of smartphones with new models and capabilities emerging at a breakneck pace.
So basically, the lawsuits were like steroids for the industry, pushing everyone to bigger and better things.
That's a good analogy. But on the other hand, all this legal maneuvering also created a climate of fear and uncertainty. Companies became more risk-averse, afraid to invest in truly groundbreaking innovations for fear of ending up in court.
So it's a catch-22. The lawsuits spurred innovation, but they also made companies afraid to innovate too much.
Exactly. It's a delicate balance. And ultimately, whether the smartphone patent wars were a net positive or negative for the industry is a matter of perspective.
Well, that's a comforting thought. So basically, we're all just along for the ride, hoping for the best, but prepared for the worst. But hey, at least we've got some awesome phones to distract us from the impending legal apocalypse, right? All right, let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll explore the final chapter of this epic saga. The current state of the patent wars and what the future holds for this crazy industry. Stay tuned, you magnificent bastards.
Welcome back to the deep dive, you beautiful degenerates. Let's finish this wild ride through the smartphone patent wars, shall we?
That's right, you glorious freaks. We've covered a lot of ground from the early days of Nokia versus Apple to the rise of Android and those batshit crazy lawsuits that made lawyers richer than Elon Musk.
We've seen how companies use patents as both shields and swords, fighting for dominance in the lucrative smartphone market.
And we've learned that patent trolls are like cockroaches. They're everywhere and they're damn hard to kill. But now let's fast forward to the present. What's the current state of play in this whole patent war shit show? Is everyone still suing the crap out of each other?
The landscape has definitely shifted. The big players are still at it, but the battleground has expanded beyond just smartphones.
Oh. So what's the new frontier? Are we talking smart toasters? Self-driving sex dolls?
While those innovations might be on the horizon, the current war zone encompasses connected devices, artificial intelligence, and 5G connectivity. It's not just about who has the coolest phone anymore. It's about who controls the entire digital ecosystem.
So basically, it's a giant game of Risk. But instead of conquering countries, they're fighting for control of the technologies that will shape the future. High stakes indeed.
Huh.
But what does that mean for us, the humble consumers? Are we going to see even higher prices for our gadgets because of all this legal bullshit?
It's hard to say for sure. Increased patent litigation could definitely lead to higher costs for consumers as companies pass on their legal expenses.
Great, just what we need. Another reason to be broke as fuck.
However, it's also possible that the fierce competition fueled by these patent wars will lead to more innovation and better products in the long run.
So it's a double-edged sword. We might have to pay more, but we might also get cooler gadgets. Decisions. Decisions.
Yes, exactly. The impact of these patent wars on consumers is complex and multifaceted. It's a delicate balance between protecting intellectual property and fostering a competitive market that benefits everyone.
Well, that's about as clear as mud. But hey, at least we're informed, right? Okay, let's talk about the players. Who's winning this new patent war? Is Apple still the king of the hill? Or are there some new contenders vying for the throne?
It's difficult to say definitively who's winning, as the patent landscape is constantly in flux. Companies are constantly buying and selling patents, forging alliances, and launching new legal attacks. It's a never-ending game of chess played with billions of dollars and the future of technology at stake.
So it's like a giant game of whack-a-mole. You knock one company down and another one pops up in its place. But let's be real, some companies are bigger and badder than others. Who are the major players in this patent war royale?
The usual suspects, Apple, Samsung, Google, and Microsoft, are still major forces to be reckoned with. They have deep pockets, vast patent portfolios, and an army of lawyers ready to unleash legal hell on anyone who steps out of line.
Yeah, those guys are like the mafia of the tech world. They don't play nice. But what about the underdogs? Are there any new players shaking things up and challenging the established order?
Absolutely. Chinese companies like Huawei and ZTE have been aggressively acquiring patents in recent years and are becoming more assertive in enforcing their intellectual property rights. They're not afraid to go toe-to-toe with the big boys. And they're changing the dynamics of the patent wars.
Interesting. So the balance of power might be shifting. The old guard might have some new rivals to worry about. It's like the Wild West out there with everyone vying for control of the future.
Yeah.
But speaking of the future, what can we expect to see in the next chapter of the patent wars?
As technology continues to evolve at a breakneck pace, we can expect to see even more patent disputes over emerging technologies. Artificial intelligence, virtual reality, the Internet of Things. All of these fields are ripe for legal battles as companies try to stake their claim and protect their innovations.
So it's basically going to be a free-for-all with everyone suing the shit out of each other. Sounds about right. Lawyers are probably popping champagne corks as we speak. But on a more serious note, is there any hope for a truce in this never-ending war? Or are we doomed to witness an endless cycle of lawsuits and legal battles?
There is always hope, however slim. Some experts believe that the increasing complexity of technology and the interconnectedness of different industries will force companies to find more collaborative ways to manage intellectual property. We may see a rise in cross-licensing agreements and patent pools where companies share their patents rather than fighting over them.
That sounds downright civilized.
Yeah.
But let's be real. These companies are driven by greed and ego. I wouldn't hold my breath waiting for them to start playing nice.
You're probably right. But regardless of how the patent wars evolve, one thing is certain. Innovation will continue, and the race to control the future of technology will only intensify.
Well, that's a sobering thought. But hey, at least we'll have some awesome new gadgets to play with along the way, right? And with that cheerful thought, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the smartphone patent wars. We have explored the history, the key players, the landmark cases, and the potential impact on the future of technology. It's been a wild ride full of legal drama, shady deals, and enough money to make Scrooge McDuck blush.
Hopefully, this deep dive has given you a better understanding of this complex and ever-evolving landscape. And who knows, maybe one day you'll be the one filing a patent lawsuit for your brilliant new app idea.
Just remember, with great power comes great responsibility. And a shitload of legal fees. Stay informed, motherfuckers.